Hi everyone, Victoria Alayi here with everyonecounts.world. I'm the author of Survival 101, and today I'm thrilled that we have Dr. Alexander Laszlo, who is someone who has studied and published and taught all over the world about thrivable education. Dr. Laszlo is a professor of human change and human systems. He's also a researcher, a consultant, a martial artist, and a father. However, because he does these things doesn't mean that is who he is. And in today's world, what I've noticed, and I even noticed it back in the day, is that a lot of people tend to try to get an education, especially after high school, that relates to the career they want to go into, and they stay laser focused and do that. Financial aid in many of the educational institutions only pays for specific types of education that is going to meet the market demands of the workforce. Dr. Laszlo is going to be discussing with us the concept of thrivable education, lifelong learning, and what that means to us, and why it's so important for each one of us as a planetary citizen to be aware of these opportunities for different ways of educating ourselves, our children, and others. And I'm just excited to hear what he has unearthed in his travels about thrivable education and why it's important. Let's get started. It's too exciting what you're doing, and I really think it's important for people to hear what you have to say.
I think with the excitement for me comes in the conversation with you, because that's where we, as they say, no one of us is as smart as all of us. So I think
Oh, I
together,
love that. I love
you know,
that.
yeah, together I'm going to be able to explore things that I would never have considered without being in conversation with you. So I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you so much for being willing to do this. I'm excited because out of everything I read, I actually was thinking maybe we could talk about thrivable education today. And here's the thing is that I have met so many people that treat education as something that they have to do
Mm.
versus a way of life. And also that they are doing it because of a job or a career that they think they should have instead of thinking of it as holistic, like you describe in thrivability. I was just going to ask a little bit about yourself to start with, but then what got you into not just being a professor, but researching education? It's basically a lot of the answers are sitting in your work, from what I can
Mm-hmm.
see. When you put out there that we live in a planetary world, we're all citizens of this world. So
Right.
wherever this conversation takes us from there, that's basically like where I'm leaping off of is we're in this boat with you.
Boy, you've got the boat going. That's a wonderful thing. You created a lot of these vessels, these vehicles, these ways of bringing that out. So that's so nice because you're providing a boat, and I feel very comfortable coming and sitting in your magic canoe, uh, you know, and we're going here. So that's really nice. So yeah, I put down a couple of things as you were setting the stage, and I think I
Okay.
might be able to touch on them. I got to say, when I was in high school, I did this thing called the International Baccalaureate, which is there was no senior slump. I had to do a thesis and all the stuff to study. But okay, fun. And okay, so I'm going to choose a topic, an area, and I was like, okay, I want to know what is this? What does it mean to be alive? What is this thing called
Ooh.
human? Right? What am I? What am I? Fundamentally, is what am I? And what am I doing here? I think we all ask that kind of question somehow, some point when we got a moment. Otherwise, we're like just in the do mode. But one of the moments, why am I doing all this? And what am I doing? And what's my purpose? Okay, people ask that kind of question and sometimes get lost in it. But all right. So I said, okay, so how am I going to get into this? I was thinking, okay, so what the fields I studied social and cultural anthropology. I thought, okay, cool. I can do that. And in that process, I became aware of like how things change over time,
Mhm.
big patterning, how civilization, how people have evolved over time. I like the physical anthropology, the precursors to human beings, the Australopithecus, Ramapithecus, and all those strange fellows who we have as our ancestors. Okay, so how did that happen? Okay, cool. So we've transformed. What are we transforming into? And that's another question I had. And like, okay, so well, wait, maybe I need to study biology, but I'm really interested mainly in human physiology. What is this thing? And I also with this vehicle that we're in, this like body, flesh, blood, bones. Okay. But I really wanted to know, okay, what is it? How do we make meaning and
Mhm.
make meaning together? And how is it? And this is the thing, because I grew up in, I don't actually, it's not right to say I grew up because I never did that. And I'm not
I
intending,
love that. I love
not
that.
intending on doing that. But okay, in my early years,
Life 101, never grow up.
that's right. That's right. But in my early years, I was in all over the place because my parents, they're from Europe, and then I studied in the US, and I said, they still live in Europe, my parents. So I'm going to go, actually, I'm going to go see them in just a couple of months.
Oh, that's nice.
But the thing is this, growing up, I didn't finish, I'm still doing it. I found that in some places, this is right and that's wrong. And they have laws about it and customs and all that. And you go to another place and it's almost the opposite.
Interesting.
And they're really sure about it. In both
Uh-huh.
places, no, we're really sure. This is like, yeah, what are you thinking? Whether it is like simple things like in the US, you go to the way you cut your meat, if you're going to be,
Uh-huh.
or eat, or cut, whatever you're going to be cutting. So you cut and then you put the knife down, you switch hands, put your hand in your lap, and then you eat. Like Europe. So my parents were European. They would keep the knife and the fork in the same hands, right? And it's impolite to put your hand in your lap. It's like,
Right.
so these little things were very confusing to me. And I'm like,
Different realities.
how is it we all are so sure that this is right and that's wrong and the thing? Okay, how am I going to find out about this? So I said, okay, so look, wait, let's figure this out. What am I going to study? Because I was also fascinated by, like, you take a banana, you eat the banana, you got a peel, you can recycle the peel, but where did the banana that you ate, where'd it go? It's like it disappeared. It's like it's in me. And I know that some of it leaves me and it's not recognizable as a banana anymore. But actually, it becomes like the atoms that were the banana, a lot of it becomes me. I am the
Ooh,
banana.
I
I am the
love
banana.
it.
But it's like literally the atoms become, but then other parts of the banana get used for energy, and that helps me like move and do things. But okay, so I was like, okay, wait, there's some magic going on because I eat the thing, it disappears, becomes me. Whoa. What is it that, okay, this is like a weird way of putting it, but if I eat something and it becomes part of me, then what is it that's bigger than me that is eating me that I become a part of? You know what I'm saying? And I was like, I get a weird mind. So I'm thinking about, okay, how do we fit into things that are larger? And I got into this systems thinking. So you see that things are like,
Interesting.
yeah, like their organ systems make up, there are 11 different organ systems, from the respiratory system to the circulatory system to the reproductive system. There are 11 of them in our body because I studied human physiology. All right. And then, but we make up one system, that organism. And okay. And so you got nested systems. And then we're inside.
Oh,
It doesn't stop here. Then there's an ecosystem. We're part of an ecosystem. So there's all those relations in there. And so that helped me with one aspect of the study, but I still wanted to know how we know what's like in one culture, this and that. I talked about that
mm-hmm.
in place. Okay, so when I went to college, I did a major in political science and a minor in human physiology. It's an aspect of biology, physiology. And they're pretty separate. And frankly, my department was like, what? Why don't you just study, if you're going to do political science, study philosophy or economics or sociology or something. But why are you doing biology? It's nothing to know. Wait, systems, they're all nested. That's after when I graduated with my bachelor's in political science and human physiology or biology. That's when I found the systems thinking and
Okay.
thinking in terms of that, and thinking in terms of relations and dynamics rather than positions and fixed things. You think in terms of flows. Whoa, okay, cool. So that's a little bit about how I got into this whole area of systems thinking. But what I really got to me a little later is it's not just thinking,
Mm-hmm.
it's really about systems sensing, systems, and ultimately it's about systems being. Because if you think too much about it, you're stuck. It's paralysis by analysis.
Right.
Just so how do we actually be the systems we want to see in the world?
Interesting. Interesting. I notice you're not saying good and bad. Oh, look at this. Be the systems you want to see in the world. I love it. We need that
It's on my
t-shirt on.
chair. It's
We need that
on my
t-shirt
chair.
on. Everyone
Right?
counts. It's on your
You
chair.
know, what's cool about this for me is
Tell me.
that it not only is exactly as you said, be the systems you want to see in the world, but it says two other things. Two other things. It says, be you in the world.
Oh, I love that. I
That's really
love
important, right?
that.
In order to do this, you got to be you in the world. And it also says a third thing. It says, the systems want to see.
Ooh.
The systems want to see. So what do they want to see? So if we want to be like be part of the ecosystem, and I love this when I found this person who talked about how They don't feel like they're a human being trying to save the Amazon rainforest. Like the people who tie themselves to the trees there and say, you want to go chop down the
Right.
tree? You want to have to go through me first. They say, I'm not a human trying to save the rainforest. I'm part of the rainforest trying to save itself. Boom.
Oh,
A,
wow.
a change of
Very
identity. I'm part
interesting.
of the rainforest trying to save itself. That's legitimate.
Wow.
That's legitimate. I'm not there blocking anything. I am expressing this aspect of me, but it's a different system, different level of being. So this is a little bit about my background and that stuff, but let me stop going on here and see if you have anything you want to. I have lots of notes that I can continue to tell you about here, given their
Well, that's what
thrivable
I'm saying. We could
education,
have a 3-hour conversation
right?
easily. So, going back to kind of the topic of education, learning, what you just told us basically showed us your experience yourself,
Mm-hmm,
what kind
mm-hmm,
of sparked you and motivated you, and how you started pulling some things together that connected in
right,
ways that other people don't necessarily see. And part of how you saw this was you started to question, why did they do it here this way and over there that way? And they both think they're
right,
right. I think it's really interesting, especially as a kid looks around and tries to make sense, or a young person or a person starting out. And a lot of people, you get a message of this is what you need to know about life. You just basically need to go out there, get a good job, make a lot of money, marry somebody, have
right.
some kids, which some of this could be possibly there's some relevance to it. But at the same time, I wonder sometimes, why do people get depression? Why do they have issues? Why do they feel so alone? And I've experienced this myself during some tough times where it's like I went around and started talking to the flowers because it
Right.
was like, wait a second, I'm for some reason thinking I'm not a basic core of goodness or worth
Mm,
much or whatever. And I went to the flowers and I said, this flower is perfect the way it is. And so I started telling the flowers how perfect they were before I knew it. It started to turn around. And like you said, and a lot of
mm,
people might think
mm,
that's crazy talk. But the truth is that, how happy are you, Dr. Laszlo? I'm very happy. Are you pretty
mm.
happy, would you say?
Well, it's a path, right? It's like for me, it's like breathing. I don't know. I'm trying to think of
Mm.
something that would be like, are you full of your oxygen right now? It's like, yeah, I don't. I'm not lacking. I'm not lacking the oxygen right now. But it's a keep. I'm not like happiness is for me is not like fixed. I got it. Okay, now I'm done. It's a moment to moment regeneration of that. It's like breathe. You got to keep breathing, and you got to keep in that exchange, even for happiness. It's a relational dynamic. One of the things also that got me when I was like studying these things in high school and then college and stuff. I was thinking, why am I memorizing all this stuff? And today, in days and ages, it's even worse because you just say, if I want to figure it out, I go and do a Google search, and now there's AI and all. So there are ways of getting information. Why am I memorizing all this? And
Right.
so a colleague of mine, Bella H. Banathy, would talk about the difference between being somebody who teaches you something. It's like, okay, they can teach you something and teach you how to fish. Great. But there's an expression from the deep south. They say, he learned me how to fish. He learned me how to do it. And if you learn,
Ah,
if you, there's a different sense. He learned me how to make a house. So being in that living, learning, because if you taught something, okay, I'm an authority, I know it, I got it, I can do it. But somehow learning is a living component. It's that relational dynamic. You're never done learning. You just
hmm.
are. If you're done learning, you're shut down. You shut off. You're dead in a certain way, right? But you can stop studying. You can stop going to school. You can stop teaching. Teaching and studying go together, right? You're a student
Ah,
or a teacher. Teacher, student, right? So you study if you're a student, and you teach if you're a teacher. But not necessarily. We can change that dynamic, and that's about creating learning environments where you can find out what's eating you. You can find out what is it. What do you want to find out? That got to move. If it's just memorizing stuff, it's like deadening. Right? It doesn't make anybody alive just to memorize stuff. Like there got to be like, how does that help you? Here's the thing, Toria. The thing is, for me, I've come to this idea of how do I human well? I think I put it there and said,
mm.
what does it mean to human well? Because we talk about being a human. Okay, but we don't really ask, what does it mean to human well? You talked about the flower, it's there, right? And
Right.
it's flowering. It's
Hmm.
doing its thing. And it's doing its thing. It's not competing with any other particular flower. You talk about the survival. But the point is, it's not doing it in order to sell more of anything or to convince people to like come and sniff it. It does create attractions, right? But the point is just by doing it, it's flowering. And in doing that, the bees come and people come and sniff it and somebody comes and sits with it like you did. It's all, so how can we just do our thing?
I love
But
it.
what is our thing? What is our thing? And this is where I get a little bit into the thrivable education, because we talk about learning, we talk about people talk about lifelong learning, right? Okay, so lifelong learning, what is that? That's, you don't just get your degree, whether it's your high school degree. Okay, I'm done. I can now go off and, or I get your college degree, your bachelor's or a master's or a doctorate or whatever. And then I got my degree. Look, here's my certificate. It shows that I know I'm done. That really shouldn't be that way. Lifelong learning is like always having, like, now that I know some things about that, I got more questions. I want to know more. That's where you're engaged with, always trying to know, not being a know-it-all, no, but
Hmm.
always trying to be more alive, really. It's about how am I humaning? But that's one aspect. There are two more, Toria. There's one
Okay.
is lifelong learning. Lifelong learning is pretty, we talk about that. But I like this notion of life-wide learning.
Interesting. That's brand new to me. Can you explain that concept a little bit more? Life wide learning.
Yeah. I came across it in some things that the UNESCO, the United Nations Education, Science, and Culture Organization, published once about life-wide learning is learning wherever you are. Lifelong is learning across your life. So you never stop learning, never stop. You can always learn more. Doesn't mean you have to be in school all the time, but it means you're all the
Right.
time on this path of inquiry. You're always inquisitive. You're asking questions. You're not just saying, I'll accept that. Like, why? Remember, my question was, why in this culture do they do this? And think that's right and that's wrong. And in other cultures, the opposite. That's the kind of question that didn't leave me alone. And that's a kind of lifelong learning question, right? Okay. Life wide is, I can ask that question and explore it anywhere. I can explore it
Aha.
not just in the classroom. Sure, I can do some formal learning about it, but I can learn that by going asking my grandparents. I can
Hmm.
go and talk to, I can go sit with a flower. These are learning environments. And life-wide learning is expanding beyond the classrooms, your learning adventure, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
I
And then
love
there's
that
this third
quote.
part.
Yes.
It is a powerful one, like expanding beyond the classroom, your learning adventure. But there's this life deep learning. And it sounds, oh, wait, that's maybe flaky, but no. Life deep is, here's this exercise that this guy once did where he had people introduce themselves to each other at the beginning of a big thing. Like,
Okay.
okay. And he said, turn to the person beside you and ask them, why are you here? And the other person has to talk to you for 1 minute without stopping. Even if you say,
Oh.
keep talking, and the other person just listens. And then you switch. Okay. And then you switch. And okay, why are you here? I want to hear the speaker talk about this. And I'm interested in this topic, whatever. And then they talk back and forth. Okay. Then they switch and it says, we're going to now do another round. There's another round after this, 2 or 3 rounds. Now ask them, why are you really here? Okay. And now you got to keep talking for 1 minute and you can't say the same thing that you just did. Okay. Okay. So you got to keep talking and talk. And then he does a third time. After they do that, third time says, really, why are you really here? And he had people by the end of this, he had people by the end of that little thing saying, okay, I got to go because I realized what I really need to do is whatever. And they don't stay for the rest because they really realize, what do they want? What do they want? They want actually something else than what they were just now doing here and that. Boom. But this is life deep, where you don't just ask the one question, like, what am I doing? Or what does this mean? So what does it really mean? No, really, why is this important? Whatever. You go deeper into it. And that's life deep learning. And often we just hit the surface of whatever we're learning. So why is that important? We often don't even ask the question. We're like, okay, so you learn something about ethics in the workplace and
Right.
about, okay, great. So you learned that. So this is why we have to be respectful of other people. Okay, but why? But wait, why do we respect all of it? But wait, what's sacred about human life? Oh, that's a good question. It's partly because we're all born and okay, yeah, but are we all the same and all born? We are right. You start getting richness in the answers here, right?
Go deeper.
So lifelong, life-wide, and life deep learning help me get at the question of how do I human well? Because what I'm really interested in is full spectrum humaning. I don't want to be just, okay, in the US, this is the way we human. Right. This is what right. full spectrum humaning. I want to learn how they do it in Timbuktu. Don't even ask me where that is right now. But I want to know. I want to know how we do it in different parts, because there are people who will have really different views of what any of our answers like. This is obvious. They might not be obvious for others, and I want to know. Wow, how do you see the world? And that's when I get to get a glimpse of how to human beyond my own little box of humaning. Wow, I didn't think about humaning like that. That's interesting. So that's my
Exactly. No,
quest.
I love that. I'm definitely going to be putting that in the notes and chapters so we have those three types of learning
Right.
documented. That's so super exciting. I have a question for you just
Yeah.
that came up while I listened to you talking about the three types of learning is that especially that example of doing the ethics course at work or whatever. Have you ever noticed that sometimes we learn things either from our grandparents or from school formally, and we think, okay, this is the way the world is, as far as this is the way it should be. Okay, we're going to treat each other with respect and everything. We're not going to steal. And then you end up in the workforce and someone's just stole your idea and they just got a
Right. Right.
promotion. So
Right.
how does the average person handle the difference between what we learn and the values that might come out of that and what we might run into when our worlds or values start to intersect with other people's learnings and
Right.
values and it doesn't? So do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah. It's a lot having to do with learning something as an ideal, right? So you learn the ethics in the workplace, right? And you learn all this stuff, and that's good. And then something happens, like you said, that is it. What do you do with that? You're like, hey, you just didn't do what we this, don't you know? And they're like, yeah, but don't tell anybody or whatever. And it's like we're just seeing this in the politics
Yep.
today.
Yep.
but for me, it really comes down fundamentally to relational intelligence. It's so. Tell me, why did you do that in a way that is going to be good for me, or is it just good for you? And let's talk about it. I want to hear, why did you do that? And what about my grandchildren? Are they included in what you just did, or is that going to make life difficult for them? What about the
Mm-hmm.
trees? When you did that, are the trees included or no? Who's not included?
Oh.
This is relational, right? You start to say, why did you behave that way? And people could be like, I did it for them. You're like, wow, that's beautiful. You really are you doing things that are going to make everyone happier and more connected to life? Or no, you're being pretty selfish about that. I would really appreciate if you didn't do that, because that's not going to help me at all. And I can't support you in that. And okay, you start getting into a relational, it's about dialogue. A friend of
Mm-hmm.
mine, David Price, talks about, I love his expression. He talks about dialogue, not
Ooh,
dialogue. And
dialogue.
yeah, it's like the Tao, like Taoism.
Oh.
And so what he talks about is there's a sacred conversation that you're in. And you're in this conversation. I don't mean sacred or religious necessarily, right?
Oh.
It's about, hey, this matters. And it matters because I think you matter and I matter. So let's try to understand this relationally. That's what relational intelligence is about. It gets at this, and you saw that article I talked about the five syntony spheres, right? Starts to ask
Yes.
you, how does this hit you at the level of your person? Okay, this is good for you. Okay, I'm glad you're doing it usually. But is it good for others as well? So now you get to be in that
Right.
human relation. Is it good for nature? Is it, or is it going to be like
Mm-hmm.
destroying it? We can't
Mm-hmm.
continue to destroy nature because we got one planet at the moment. And so how is it going to be good for nature as well? Okay. And is it respectful of our ancestors? Right. Right. I love to think about how we are ancestors in training right now.
I
Okay,
love that. I love that. I've heard you
right.
say that before.
Yeah, we're future ancestors right now.
Uh-huh.
So people at one point, are they going to dismiss us and say, okay, you're irrelevant? You guys, I don't even care what you did then. But we're trying to
Mm.
make a world that works, right?
Mhm.
So it would be nice. I would like it if some descendants of mine would say, oh, yeah, we're carrying on the vision. We're somehow
Right.
connecting. So all of this is connecting, and that's all relational. And this is where quantum physics comes in. But I will get to that only if you want me to in a
Of
little bit later.
course. Of
Yeah.
course. Yes. I think people
Yeah.
need to know why that's important. Although
Yeah, I think,
remember, we're talking to people that
right.
might glaze over fast. So how can you bring quantum physics to the average person's? Why is it important?
It's such a weird world there. They talk about the physicists, the quantum physicists, that talk about, they describe what goes on at the quantum and subquantum domain. And it's like Alice in Wonderland. It's like weird things happen, and things happen exactly at the same time, which they don't happen over here. And you can see that they couldn't happen in any other way. They only happen exactly at the same time if you look at them. And when you don't look at them, they're like, you don't even know what they're doing. So if this is like this is really what's happening in the quantum domain. Wait a minute, are there different laws? In a certain way, there are different dynamics that hold true in the quantum domain. So things like entanglement and superposition. We don't need to get into what those are, but these entanglement is like where what happens to one subatomic particle, or quantum particle actually, way over here, is going to be completely and exactly the same as what's happening to another particle way over here. They are connected across space and time. So that's non-local transtemporal connection. Whoa.
Interesting.
But how does that affect us? The
Right.
point is this. If this is the way we're made up, we're not like separate from the quantum. We're just the very, very small
Yeah.
parts that we
Made up
can't
of
actually see.
atoms and everything
Right,
else. Yeah.
right. And so we are just a larger dimension of all that stuff that's happening there in that weird way. So we think, okay, so one of the ways that things happen in the universe is that they are connected. Because we tend to think I'm
Right.
completely independent of you and of anything else, and I make my own rules. You know what? Doesn't really actually work that way. There's this guy, Theodore Holmes Nelson, in 1974. He came up with this term intertwinglement. And
Interesting.
I like the
Intertwinglement.
word. It's just nicer than entanglement. Is like what happens to my beard in the morning. Like I got to get it unentangled. It's like I don't like the word entanglement. It's like it's entangled. But intertwingle has a magic to it. It's like how are things intertwingled? And if you look at them, the more you look, the more you see coincidences. That happened at the same time. And
Absolutely.
then often we write them off and say, "Oh, coincidence. It's just luck or what." But the point is, Niels Bohr said this: nature plays with a sticky deck of cards, which means coincidences happen in clumps. Like things happen that isn't just
Ah.
a random. If it was a random universe, you and I wouldn't be here. There's too much complexity that have allowed for things to connect in the ways that they have that give rise to this level of expression of complexity that you and I are. That
Right.
didn't happen just randomly. It didn't happen by the random mixing of chemicals and molecules and boom, here we are. No, things would keep falling apart if that was random. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
coherence factor, coherence and this clumping of patterns. So when you start to see the universe as a process in which things aren't just random, and there is
Right.
almost a good conspiracy of things clumping together, it's not a random array. Does that mean that it's always going to work in your favor? No, it does not at all. If
Or
things
what
can
you
clump,
think is supposed to happen. Yeah.
things can clump negatively for a while. The one disaster after another, that can happen as well. But the point is, you can figure or you can think about or invite, maybe is a better way of looking at it, invite engagements with other people, with the ecosystems that are more likely to clump in directions that are supportive of life than ones that are not supportive of life. If you set up something in the forest that helps catch the rainwater and help it get to the different plants, something like that, okay?
Okay.
Chances are that's going to have a ripple effect that's
Mm-hmm.
positive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's the clumping. If you do something where you just leave something radioactive in that rainforest, chances are it'll have a ripple effect that's going to be negative. And the negative things are going to, it'll clump all that stuff. So this is the intertwinglement potential. This is where the quantum physics and stuff comes in, because you can realize that, what I do matters. It may seem like it's insignificant. Gandhi said this. Actually, he said that what you do may seem utterly insignificant, but it is of the utmost importance that you do it anyway. Why? Because it might have that connection. You don't know how it's going to have that positive ripple effect. Because here's the thing we mentioned also from quantum physics, transtemporal, non-local. So what you do could affect someone else at a different point in time, or could
Right.
affect someone else at a different place. It's not just right here, right next to it. That's the classical physics. Quantum physics says it happens over time and over distance, what you do now.
Oh,
So
that's wonderful.
that's part of the intertwinglement, right? The
Mm-hmm.
idea that, yeah, it does matter what we do because we are all fundamentally connected through the quantum domain. We can't see it. And it doesn't feel like that, but it does when you sit with a flower, you're connected. When you sit long enough with nature, you can feel the connections. That's the thing.
Absolutely. Very well said. And funny that when I was in college, I read a book called The Tao of Physics. And I
Oh
don't know
yeah,
if
by
you
Victor
have read that
Pepper.
or not, but I
Yeah,
tell you,
Victor
as
Pepper.
someone in college, it really impacted me how some of the spiritual beliefs from long ago, such as if a
Right.
butterfly flaps its wings in India, it's going to affect
It
somebody's
could.
laundry line in Colorado. Or and so the
Or it
thing
could set
is,
up a tornado. It could actually
yeah,
like flap its wings and
exactly.
boom, right?
Exactly. And so I guess what you're saying is if somebody listening here is thinking they're insignificant or they don't matter, or they're thinking, what do I need to do just to get a job and do whatever? They might want to go thinking longer, thinking wider, thinking deeper about
Right.
what is really going on in their lives. What are they really here for? And the other point you made is that they may be withholding something that the world needs as well. And so I really want to
Exactly.
thank you for bringing that up, that every person is needed. And it's up to each of us to dig deeply to figure out what is that potential? What do I feel that I could be doing out there? Or just how can I be in the world? How can I human well? And just me humaning well is going to help others. And if nothing else, being a power of example. So
Mm,
if somebody is going through a transition right now
mm,
and they are like, I'm helping somebody right now and she's trying to figure out how to get into another field and she's not passionate about it. Her parents are still telling her you can't make a living that way and everything. So this is all very compartmentalized thinking.
mm,
If you were a younger person or somebody going through a transition, how could you step back and apply in a practical
mm.
way some of the things you've shared today to like right now? Like, how could you actually step back if you were like a 20-year-old
Right.
right now?
Right. I'm going to bring this right back into two things here. One is, you probably have had this where somebody has said to you, Toria, you get me and I feel seen by you. And it's just as important that you're just there. And you're like, I didn't do anything. But this is, I think everybody has that. We don't know how we impact other people. Or maybe
Right.
we're impacting, impact is like a hard word. Maybe we're positively influencing a dog or a bird that might have otherwise hit the window because you like waved or something. Every day we can do little things. And then you don't know what that bird goes on and does. He might be actually a stork and delivers a baby something. I don't know. Anyway, the bottom line is these little things impact. There was a really weird movie a while ago. It wasn't the butterfly effect. That's another one. But where they went back in time and they had a system where they could go back and they could take people on tours back to when the dinosaurs were. But you can't touch anything because if you touch
Right.
anything, you change the course of history. And somebody, by mistake, stepped on a butterfly.
Aha.
And when they went back to the present, it was all different. I mean,
Wow. I love
really
it.
different.
I love it.
So it was an interesting movie. The thing is that we don't know, and often we don't see, like we do a little thing. It's like that, like either helping a butterfly or stepping or whatever. We do something and we don't know what the impacts are going to be because of that non-linear effect, right? It's not just one-to-one correlation. It's non-linear, which means that something affects something indirectly that we can't see how it could have affected that, but it does because of a cascade of different effects. Okay, so a cascade. But this is what the thing is that the scientists nowadays talk about living in a VUCA world, and VUCA
VUCA.
stands
Tell me what that
volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Like,
sounds
oh,
like
these
our
are okay,
world. It sounds
right?
like our world.
And but now you get all these people who are expressing the same thing in different ways. Because for some people, VUCA means that sounds. For other people, like ambiguous. This doesn't quite get to it. So they came up with another term. The psychologists called it RUPT. That things appear rapid, unpredictable, paradoxical, and tangled. All expresses the same thing, right? And
Yes.
then there's even more. It express the same thing: brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and unintelligible. You're like you can't make sense of it. A lot of people, and not just young people, are in this kind of world. How do I make sense of what's going on? So a lot for me in this new educational frame, it's not even very new. It really is actually pretty old, involves shifting away from trying to be the know-it-all speaker to being a keynote listener. We can
Oh, I
all be
love
keynote
that. I've
listeners.
never heard that. A,
Yeah.
a
How do
keynote
we be keynote
listener.
listener, right? And to do that, and that means that's so much more powerful for me. This, Dalai Lama once said, "You speak and you don't learn anything new because all you're doing is saying stuff you already know. But when you listen, that's where you can grow and learn and develop and connect and then solve problems, solve your own problems. When you're a keynote listener, you have much more probability of being able to solve things and fix your problems or deal with your VUCA and rupt world because you're it's not like you're passive and letting things happen, but you're really being an active observer, saying, wow, look. So for example, if you see as an active observer that the dog is struggling to get out of that ditch over there, as an active observer, you notice that because if you were just driving along, you might be
Right.
like, whatever, something's happened, but then you can stop and help the dog. And now you've set up a different ripple of ways of being. So you notice more when you're a keynote listener.
And a lot of what you just shared was being present as well, being as
Exactly.
present as possible. And
Exactly.
I suspect we could have a whole
Exactly.
video just on being an observer, honestly, of our
Right.
own thoughts, of everything.
There'd be a lot of silence in the video because we'd just be sitting there listening. But
Which actually I do quite a bit. I have to be
that's good.
careful. Like I could meditate for hours. What I want to ask you is, of course, I hope you come back again. I hope we talk again. Let's
Right.
just call
Let's
it
do
that.
that.
Let's talk
Let's
again
do that.
because there's so many more things that we
Good.
can frame in a different way for people than they might not have heard before to get a different
Right.
point of reference. But I also want to say,
Right.
what's the best way to keep up with you and your work? Because I know you have a LinkedIn. Are you on X? Or
I
you
got a
have a
website.
website? That's right.
Yeah, that's
Uh-huh.
probably the best thing. Actually, tonight we're going to start a podcast series of our own. I'm learning about
Yes.
that. But
Send us a link.
okay, as soon as it gets going here. But there's a dialogue series, there's an inquiry channel also where we're exploring things. Yeah, that's probably the best thing. You have the link to my website, right?
I do, but can you repeat it for the crowd?
Absolutely. It's pretty simple because since it's my website here, it's alexanderlaszlo.net. And
Okay.
I put it in the chat as well. It's right there. There's
Okay.
no space. It's Alexander Laszlo. You got to remember there's an SZ LO.
Oh, I always forget that. That is, yep. I'm
Yeah,
glad you
yeah,
mentioned that because I'll make sure to pay attention.
yeah.
Hey,
No
thank you
worries.
so much, Alexander. It's been a
Toria,
pleasure.
thank
Really
you for
enjoyed
doing
it.
this. Yeah, me
Yes.
too.
Look
Your
forward to
energy is
talking again.
contagious, Toria. Just so you know,
Well,
you are humaning awesomely because the way you are is like, it just brings joy. So
it
thank you
takes
for
one to
being.
know one. Okay. Thanks, Alexander. Have a wonderful afternoon or evening.
Big hugs. You
Okay.
too. Bye bye then.
Thanks.